Everyone, and welcome to an emergency edition of the Sox Machine podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, joined by the managing editor of SoxMachine.com. It's Jim Margalus, and we are also joined by our friend Beefloaf from the 108 as we are streaming live at 8 p.m. Central Time on Friday night, December 16th, because we have nothing better else to do on a Friday night. But the White Sox made some news after mocking them for more than a month, not doing anything this offseason. They finally came through. Big-time news. Andrew Benintendi signs with the Chicago White Sox, and it is the largest free agent contract in White Sox history. 5 years, $75 million guaranteed for Benintendi to most likely play left field for the Chicago White Sox. And we'll talk about as far as the contract. We'll talk about how Benintendi helps the White Sox. We'll also address maybe some of our concerns and what the red flags are with this signing. And we'll also take a look at what could be coming next for the White Sox this offseason. For those that are watching the live stream on our YouTube page at youtube.com/SoxMachine, if you guys have questions or comments, you want to share your thoughts about the Andrew Benintendi signing, you can put them in the comments section. Let's pretend this is Twitter Space, but with video, as Elon Musk has taken away Twitter Space from me, Jim. I am very heartbroken about that. But Jim, I'll start with you. Andrew Benintendi, 5 years, $75 million. What is your initial thought of this signing?
Thank goodness for Aaron Judge picking the Yankees over the Giants, or else the complexion of the free agent pick'em contest would be considerably different. So yeah, bring up that graphic. So there you go. They would have had the tiebreaker over us. So, woo! As for Benintendi himself, I find myself having to separate the player from the timing and the money, because it feels like the player's all right. The player does what he's supposed to do for this White Sox lineup. It's just a little sad, that he is the biggest contract in White Sox history for like an okay player. It's just, it's not so much that the White Sox wanted to spend the money, it's that they had to get an adequate left fielder. It's also a case where if Benintendi is the biggest move, and maybe he won't be, but I'm guessing he will be. It does signal that they feel like it's still Tim Anderson, Eloy Jimenez, Yohan Moncada, Andrew Vaughn stepping up. Just the incumbents are going to be the ones carrying the load, and Benintendi is going to be taking a supporting role. Brandon Nimmo type, any of the shortstop signing, they would be like, okay, we're going to try to really push ourselves. They're going to be the guys to give this core a push. Benintendi doesn't seem like he's that type unless he can really take advantage of the jet stream out to right field in a way that the StatCast says he might be able to. But I think just right now, he looks like a guy who's just supposed to be filling a hole so that the White Sox are not undermined by a position that could have been fixed in the offseason.
Beefloaf, on your guys' show, because you streamed last night, you were talking about the outfield options for the White Sox and just the free agent options. Everyone's doing this. Everyone that covers the White Sox before today, we're all wondering, when you look at the free agent list, that the options are dwindling very quickly. And if they're going to make a splash, or if they're going to sign anyone, they have to act pretty soon. And of course, they act the very next day, or the gears were already in motion for the White Sox to sign this. I'm sure this is not something they just woke up today and decided, you know what, we're going to sign Andrew Benintendi for 5 years. But in your guys' show, you're one of those that's not super excited about this addition for the White Sox. What are your thoughts about Andrew Benintendi, Beef?
I mean, in general, I kind of agree with Jim. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the player, but there's nothing really to excite you about the player either. There's no huge carrying tool. He does a few things well that the White Sox really need. He has a high walk rate for now, and the White Sox really were lacking that. But a lot of the things that he does well are things the White Sox already did well in 2022. They didn't strike out a lot. They hit a ton of singles and got on base kind of that way. He at this point in his career, he doesn't hit for power. The White Sox didn't hit for power last year. So a lot of the things that he does are redundant to the things that the White Sox were already doing last year and having a fairly poor offense doing so. So I'm pretty feeling very mediocre about this. I'm happy to plug in a 2-win player wherever you can. Like, always think that's a good idea. And I'm also happy that they're actually shoving the money out there. Like, to me, that some of the key is just getting comfortable with the market and saying, yes, we are going to play in this market. And yeah, I know it's only a 2-win player, but we're going to give this person $15 million a year. To me, that's a really good sign that there's a willingness to do that. And I don't know if that's Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams kind of pulling on the chairman, or the chairman pushing them. You guys have been too inactive. Go out there and do something. I don't care, but get the money out in the marketplace. And so I'm very happy with that part. But as the player, is just kind of a boring player. Does a bunch of things okay, and then that's kind of it. That's what he does.
I believe you called Andrew Benintendi, quote, the Jennifer Gardner of Major League Baseball in your guys' show. Why are we slamming Alias? Like, why are we doing this?
Well, what's in your wallet? $75 million. Boom.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly right. Well, my thought there was, I think to a certain segment of the population, Andrew Benintendi looks much more appetizing than he does to me. To me, he just looks like kind of a vanilla player. When I look at the commodities that come out of an Andrew Benintendi, like, a lot of people are going to point to, oh, okay, well, he's a league average left fielder, so that's great. That's plugging in a spot where we had terrible defense. But yes, any of the signings kind of would have been that. It would have been tough to be as bad as you already were on defense. I'm looking for something that's really pushing the team in the right direction. And for me, it's only the walk rate at this point, just looking at kind of the profile. I guess one other nice thing is looking at last year at StatCast, every pitch type, he basically hit for average. So that's kind of a good sign that in an offense where sometimes they're lacking, depending on the matchup, he should be a steady force in there, even if he's nothing fantastic.
Jim, you wrote about this on SoxMachine.com in the post announcing the signing. Oftentimes when we look at the players the White Sox sign, they need a caddy, is what you would call it. They need some type of platoon player to help them out. A great example would have been if the White Sox accomplished one of my ideas, Colton Wong. If they traded for him before the Brewers sent him to Seattle, Colton Wong would need a caddy against left-handed pitching because Wong can't hit left-handed pitching. That doesn't necessarily seem to be the case for Benintendi against lefties, that he still does a good enough job contact and drawing walks. There's not a lot of power, but you can still have him in the lineup even against left-handed pitching.
Yeah, I would say two kinds of caddies. One is the lefty righty. The other is defensive replacement late in games. There's a lot of players who just need help to round out 9 innings of effectiveness. And he is not that guy. He can play a full game no matter what. Maybe you don't want him in against a lefty late in a game when you really need an extra base hit or a home run. If you're trying to sell out for power in a certain situation, he really hasn't shown the ability to turn around left-handed pitching or at least hit him with authority, but he gets on base. He seems like somebody who should bat. You could say in the right lineup, if you're going righty lefty, you could have him batting second in a lineup against righties. Against left-handed pitching, you might want him batting eighth. So that way, if he gets on base, he can be on base for Tim Anderson coming up. And then, maybe that right-handed heavy nature lineup will come through against the lefty. So there are ways to play him no matter what. He's fine defensively. I think people had higher hopes for him defensively, being somebody who could play center feasibly well and maybe right field, but it really seems like left field's his home, so you have to settle for that. But that's okay because Oscar Colas should be a plus right fielder in time. Maybe I'm counting him to be average just because it might take him a while to just get an idea of reads in the league and just exit velocities, wind patterns, etc. But he should be fine in right field for the foreseeable future. So left field is fine for him. The fact that he hits righties better than lefties, I think there's 130 OPS point OPS split. That's better than somebody who would be 730 against no matter who, just because the White Sox need somebody with a defined strength against righty. So he does seem to be that guy versus AJ Pollock last year, who was a righty who hit righties better, but then when that disappeared, he had nothing. So this feels like a little bit more sustainable, tangible, expectable than what Pollock, carried into last year. And I'm hoping that the rug won't be pulled out from under us in the White Sox in a similar way that Pollock just kind of showed up and provided very little.
And lost me a steak dinner bet. Benintendi again hit 304 last year with a 373 on base percentage, slugged a little below 400 at 399 with just 5 home runs and 51 RBIs. According to Fangraphs, he was a 2.8 WAR player. looking at the 2023 projections, this is via Steamer. Steamer is projecting Andrew Benintendi to be a 268 hitter with a 338 on base percentage, slugging 409, so an OPS drop for Benintendi in 2023. An increase in home runs to 13 home runs, an increase in RBIs to 62. But as both Jim and Beefloaf have mentioned, still around a 2-WAR player, 2.3 for Andrew Benintendi, and that is his 50th percentile projection. When it comes to Benintendi, it's so easy to draw the storyline, Beef, to the new manager of the Chicago White Sox, Pedro Grifol. And for any new manager that steps into a clubhouse, I think they need some type of ally to help back them up with any of the messaging that's being shared in the clubhouse, especially when the White Sox start out in spring training, which is funny because Grifol he says the same things that every new manager that comes in. We're going to have a heightened focus during spring training. We're going to have drills running in real time, in game time. And every White Sox veteran has decided, you know what? I'm going to play in the World Baseball Classic. So a lot of the White Sox veterans are not even going to be part of spring training. But Andrew Benintendi has had that past experience with Pedro Grifol. Do you think that will help the transition of Grifol in his first year managing the White Sox, managing someone that he has been coaching the last few years in Kansas City?
I hope so. I hope that there's some synergies there, and that Andrew's communication with his teammates will kind of help Pedro in that spot. But you never know. You never know if there was even much of a relationship. Some players do gravitate towards particular coaches and other ones don't, and some stay on their own. And my guess would be, the guy's a professional, and at worst, he probably won't make any waves. But hopefully there is some sort of connection there, and he's able to get people familiar with the way he does it, or be the old vet that just sort of smiles and laughs and talks to the other vets. Yeah, this is what he's going to do to us for a while, but we'll be fine if we get through this tough part of camp or something like that. So I'm hopeful for that.
Yeah, just looking through the comments right now during the stream, there's a lot of people that are mentioning the 5 years. Jim, that is the thing that surprised me the most with Benintendi.
Got to stay under the luxury tax.
Got to stay under the luxury tax. We just had this conversation, right? Like this is what teams are doing. And Beef, you even wrote about this in 2020 as well for your guys' blog. That
yes.
This is really not a new concept. What is new is like seeing multiple 11-year deals or even a 13-year contract, signing players to their like age 40. That is a bit odd to see multiple of those types of contracts in one off season. I think that's what's drawing a lot of attention. But 5 years for Andrew Benintendi, it's somewhat making me rethink and what the near future holds for the White Sox, Jim, because at the same time that the White Sox, the news was coming out that Andrew Benintendi signing with the White Sox, the Minnesota Twins signed Joey Gallo. Now, Joey Gallo, we talked about that rumor and that hypothetical of him joining the Chicago White Sox. It's a 1-year contract for $11 million. If you told me 2 days ago that Andrew Benintendi is going to sign for 5 years, $75 million, and Joey Gallo is going to sign for 1 year, $11 million, guess which one signs with the White Sox? 100 times I would have said Joey Gallo, because it makes sense with what we could be possibly seeing in 2024 with the White Sox shedding payroll, maybe entering into some reload or rebuild phase of the franchise, Jim. But what do you make of this 5 years? You mentioned that you have to separate the two. Like, does this change the way the White Sox may even look at 2024 as well?
It gives them some continuity, because when you look at the outfield, like, there isn't an outfield. We've talked about it before. Like, it's Luis Robert and half of Eloy Jimenez and maybe like a quarter of Gavin Sheets. And that's really the outfield at this point. So they needed somebody who, you could feel comfortable starting. I mean, Colas is coming up, you figure. So he's there, but you also want to provide some cushion, like to where if he doesn't do well his first time up, like that's forgivable. Like, you don't want the entire rebuild or continue to contend decision hinging on the first 2 months of Oscar Colas. So it's good to have like some insurance there. But even beyond like this year, it's still like Robert, still Colas, but then left field is just, there are no heir apparents. especially if Jimenez is going to be at the DH from here on out. I don't see him getting better or safer in left field. I think Sheets probably peaked in right field, and I thought it was funny that the Bill James handbook said that he was the 5th most likely to get hurt, just injury risk, and which is funny just because like his history, he's always been healthy and available, and that's been one of his strengths is that like you can set him down, he'll come right back up because he's going to be healthy for it. But you watch him throw his body around sometimes in right field, and that's like a loud thud. Like I could hear that through the TV. So just you have to imagine like, they maybe saw the same things. So it does give them the ability to just, have a left fielder. They don't have to worry about it. They don't have to keep trying to go into the market and find somebody who can hit righties. Like I think that's really the struggle there. So I think it's fine. It knocks the average annual value to 15 million. We'll see how it breaks down, but just like that's gonna be fine in the books. If you look years ahead, at least normal teams, like top half money teams, we'll look at 15 million, like one guy making 15 million, and say like, that's fine. We can spend around it. We can trade them for somebody else's bad contract. We can just DFA them. Like it'll be fine in 2026 if we don't like it. Like we'll move on.
We did get this question in the YouTube comments section from Billy Wires, and it's appropriate, Beef, so don't be too concerned. Billy wrote, "Is this it for the outfield, or can one dream of Michael Conforto in right field too? Beef, do you think this is it for the White Sox outfield with the Benintendi signing?"
I think I agree with Billy. I would love for them to go back in that direction. And the reason being, Jim set the table nicely that they did want to have a mainstay here, right? And that's why they were willing to choose the guy who, one, was probably going to take a long-term deal. Some of these guys want shorter deals to reset their marketplaces. And two, they were willing to go with a guy who is left field only. Like, if you look at Benintendi hasn't played another outfield position since 2019. So you're really buying a left fielder for the long term here. And so it's like, okay, you're going to settle on that one. Where some of these other guys, Conforto being one of them as well, they're looking to reset their market. So they're going to take these shorter term deals, opt-out deals. I wish they would. I wish they would spend whatever remaining money they have open up the purse strings and throw it at Michael Conforto and set the lineup there, so you give Ostercola some chance to, if it doesn't work out, you have something there, some option. Because you're right, there's no one coming up in the minors. Now, the only concern there for me, if you do go in that direction, which would be great for the everyday lineup, I still don't see the guy on the roster or even really in the minors who, if Luis Robert is down for a few weeks, a month, who can play center field. I don't think that guy, Lurie Garcia, I don't want it to be Lurie. I feel bad for Lurie Garcia. He gets too much hate. But, I would like it to be, I'd like a competent outfielder that could take that spot. But yes, that's where I'd be shooting. I'd shoot at corner outfielder again, a guy with a high walk rate. This guy has power, though, at least Conforto, and the White Sox are dying for power. I would love to go in that direction.
Now, that would be an interesting configuration, the outfield, Jim, having Benintendi, Robert, and Conforto. And as Beef mentioned, there's the injury risk, but we always talk about boom and bust. And I know as White Sox fans, and for us that's been covering the White Sox for years, 7 out of 10 times it's going to bust. But if you are looking to try to compete with the Yankees and Astros this year, if you truly have World Series dreams, I think I would Beef here, and I'm with Billy. Why not? Why not take it one step further? I'm sure we'll still see Oscar Colas this year at some point in 2023 because guys get hurt. But why not take that extra step? And if you exceed the luxury tax, that's fine. It's not that great of a penalty, and take the risk of signing Michael Conforto.
Guys get hurt? That's news to me. Basically stay healthy.
Pretty much.
This, I think now the Conforto deal makes more sense. Like if Conforto were the one outfield signing, if Joey Gallo were the one outfield signing, that's a lot to risk. Like the position you sorely needed in the hands of a guy who might not be healthy, or in Gallo's case, just might be broken, or like a fundamentally just flawed player who generates the most perverted .9 WAR possible. So that's why I didn't really care for those two signings in a vacuum. But like now that you have that stable, knock on wood, the stable presence there in left field, is not going to excite you, but at least is not going to be, even like when when Benintendi's had down years, they've been playable. They've been, he's not been the one killing a team unless you're counting on like a breakout. But I think now that everybody has set their expectations accordingly, he shouldn't be in a position to break a team. Whereas Conforto could if he were on his own. But now that, Benintendi is there, sure. Like, I guess we'll see what his price is. Bellinger was in the same boat, and I liked him better as like an additional signing, just somebody to like make Colas earn it. We had this discussion back in 2020 with Andrew Vaughn, or 2021 rather, with Andrew Vaughn, and just being like, more bats and spots, block him. What if he's blocked? Who cares? The Dodgers block all their guys all the time. Like that's what you have to like just get past the idea of like pieces neatly fitting into place and just be more like guys get hurt. Some guys stumble, sometimes you play. That's when you play guys out of position to get all the bats in. You don't play guys out of position because like, oh my God, there's nobody else, which is where they've gone for Jake Berger at second and such. Like, so I would like to see a case where if they do go back to that, well, sure, block Colas, block him for a couple of months, make him, if Robert gets hurt, that might be your center fielder. He's not a good center fielder, but he's played it like the White Sox have played him there as much as they played him in right. So, that might be the guy who, if Robert gets hurt once again, plug him in, just see how he does. Like that's what I want to see. More bats than spots. Finally, second base. I think there are enough internal options to where you can cycle through and find one that doesn't kill you. But yeah, I think left field, Benintendi solves that. Whereas, having the entire year hinge on Conforto or Gallo or Bellinger being the guy would have been pretty brutal. And I think like just, it's the kind of situation where if it worked out as poorly as he thought, you look at the year and say like, how could we have expected that to work? With Benintendi, like, if he hits his projections 2 to 3 wins, like, yeah, we expected that. And it's going to be everybody else's fault, I think. That's kind of how I'm looking at it.
We did get this question, and it comes from David. Will Eloy Jimenez be permanent DH? David, I hope so. I really do. And I think he's still going to get starts in left field, Beef. I still think Eloy may get 20 starts this year out in the outfield. So don't completely give up your outfield glove. I think Eloy just needs to understand that that's how he gets hurt. It's when he's in defense mode the majority of the time. And they need to protect him because when he came back and he was mostly the permanent DH at the end of 2022, Eloy Jimenez was raking. Like, if you're looking at the White Sox collection of hitters, who's the most likely to have a 900 OPS? It's Eloy, and you need him in this lineup every single day. So I think with this signing with Benintendi being a left fielder, as you mentioned, Beef, Eloy should be the everyday DH, right?
I agree. And I think we noticed in the second half last year, he wasn't entirely healthy. And that was part of the reason why they were DHing him, right? He kind of wasn't, he was 70, 75%. But it almost looked like it allowed him to just focus on his craft of hitting and not worry about any of the extraneous things that go along. I think for him, that's a lot of work, a lot of mental work to play left field. And it was a lot less for him to be the DH, just focus in on hitting, because you saw the walk rate popped up. He started laying off all the bad pitches he would always swing at. He's hit a little less ground balls. I'd love him to hit the ball in the air a little bit more, but like a lot of the things that you thought Eloy Jimenez, like when you watch AAA Eloy Jimenez, you're like, oh, he's going to be a monster. That's what it looked like in the second half. And so why move him from that spot? Why add more to his plate? Just allow him to be that guy. The White Sox need that guy desperately.
They really do. Again, if there's anyone in this lineup that can hit 40-plus home runs, I still feel like it's Eloy Jimenez. And I feel like if he plays more than 150 games, he's got an honest shot to go after Albert Bell's record. Like, I'm still high on Eloy Jimenez's offensive ability. Just the fewer games that he's out in the outfield, Jim, the better for him and the White Sox. And I know it's something that he doesn't want to hear. And I know Pedro Grifol has already mentioned that Eloy's going to get some practice time in spring training and in spring training games in left field because I know
that's what happened.
that's how he misses 6 months. Pedro, let's be mindful of this. But
you weren't there. You weren't there, man.
You can see him dunk the left field wall in a meaningless spring training game. We were there. But it does make sense. I guess if Eloy's your permanent DH, or he's getting most of the DH at bats, and he's good against right-handed pitching and left-handed pitching, so he can be in the lineup against whomever. Like, what do you do with Gavin Sheets at the moment? Is Gavin Sheets the odd man out here?
He's, I think he played a corner spot well enough. We'll see how the bench shapes up, but right now there is a possibility of like bench power. Like he seems like the bench power guy. Could also be maybe traded. Like if you feel good about Andrew Vaughn being at first base and feel like he can finally survive a 6-month grind now that he's not expected to run. Although I still get Carlos Rodon vibes from like, just you didn't give him time to actually survive a 5-month grind. Then you throw him the 6-month end. That's still kind of an open question to me, but right now it seems like he's good depth. Like it's bad for his individual development because right now I think he just kind of gets limited to righties, maybe playing some first base, not playing much outfield, some DH spots here and there, especially if Jimenez is playing in only DH and he's likely to play like more games. It does freeze him out, but I think right now. I think he played right field or corner spot well enough to stand out there once in a while. So if you need to get by for a week, he can do that. He can get by at first base if you need him to. And I think he's just going to be filling gaps here and there, which is fine. It's just, when it comes to Gavin Sheets himself, he might not be fine with it. But he probably needs one more year of service time and one more year of like getting through before like he can complain about it or like look for another job. But, have his agent softly inquire about trades, like if he needs just to play. But this year, I think, given how often they got hurt last year, I don't think anybody on the 40-man roster should count themselves out from, a serious amount of playing time. Just, it's not there for him right now.
So naturally, with Andrew Benintendi signing with the Chicago White Sox and being plugged into left field for at least the next 5 years, for $75 million. We'll see where he bats in the lineup, but I'm with you, Beef. And I think you mentioned as well, Jim, that batting him second behind Tim Anderson is a pretty good idea to put the on-base percentage guys ahead of Andrew Vaughn and Eloy Jimenez and Yasmani Grandal and drop Yohan Moncada further down the lineup where he could still figure out what kind of hitter that he's going to be at the plate in 2023. As I'm sure he'll go through some adjustments. But naturally, the next question is for White Sox fans. Okay, great. You spent some money, but what's next? What are the White Sox going to do? There's still some holes in this roster or some areas of improvement. We talked about Michael Conforto and possibly in right field. Beef, what do you see the next move being for the White Sox, or are they truly done on December 16th?
I don't think they're done, but for me, it's undoubtedly an outfielder. It's either an impact player in right field like Michael Conforto we're talking about, or some speedy bench outfielder that can handle center field and can be a pinch runner for this team. So I'm thinking probably a righty too. If you're penciling in Oscar Colas to have both of the corners hitting lefty and only Luis Robert hitting righty. I mean, I'm thinking these guys that will not excite you, may even make you vomit. But someone like Albert Almora Jr. or Brett Phillips or someone can run, we know they can play the position. They're just above average defensive guy, and they're not above 30. Like the center fielders start dying when they get above 30. They get their wing. And we saw Lorenzo Cain was the best center fielder in baseball. He got above 30. He got his wings. He was gone. He ascended to heaven. We don't want a guy above 30 to be in that spot. That's why I'm not bringing Adam Engel back. A beautiful caboose on that man, but he's finished as far as the Beefloaf's concerned in a White Sox uniform. So I would go swimming around in those pools and see who you could find there. I know I saw someone in the comments mention, maybe that's Victor Reyes. I don't know if Victor Reyes is more of a tall drink of water. I'm not sure he has the speed that some of these guys do to really play center, but that's the kind of guy I would grab kind of for this team, because you may end up in a spot where, like Jim was mentioning, Gavin Sheets probably ends up on the roster, and when he's playing the outfield, like he needs a sub, like he needs a caddy at the end of the game, and some of these guys you might want to run for Eloy Jimenez at the end of a game, and Lurie Garcia does that fine, but it's nice to have an extra person on the bench that does that. So I'm either thinking someone like Conforto or one of these fleas.
Okay, I like some of these ideas. Beef, how about you, Jim? What do you think is the next move by the White Sox?
I'm looking at the center field list right now just to kind of get an idea who's there. Billy Hamilton. That could be the Billy Hamilton reunion.
Too old.
Jake Marisnick. He's 31. So yeah, he's on the other side and kind of fading, but like he might be somebody who, is there a dead cat bounce there or something? That's the one guy who jumps out to me as a possible fit. I think it frees up now a lot of interesting possibilities. Like now that Benintendi is here and the White Sox spent the money to solve left field, I think, you can still talk about reliever trades. You don't have to, but now I think the leverage is a little bit in the White Sox favor in terms of just if they're shopping around Hendricks or Graveman or like Lopez or something like that. I think Lopez probably least likely, but still just, the possibilities. I could see them just being like, oh, we don't have to trade him now. We no longer look like we're desperate for an outfielder or a second baseman. Let's see what you got. And I could see the conversations being a lot more free flowing now because they can just move on. They have that position solved, and they can theoretically go in with the lineup they have. So I'm curious to see if, I would think that this makes them less likely to deal Hendricks, but also I think just allows them to, it's like buying a car when you don't need one, like walking to a dealer and just being like, if I can drive my car home and not feel bad about it, if I'm not getting the right price, the right vibe, then, that's the most enjoyable time to buy a car, is when you can walk away and not feel bad about it, or not feel like, oh, I need to get something. So I think that's, I wonder if this changes the complexion of the trade talks now that they have that guy that they, I'm not sure if they've swung and missed on other targets or they're waiting for Benintendi all along, but it's a case where, they can make some interesting moves now to really, like, whether it's second base, like I've heard Gleyber Torres mentioned, in a Liam Hendricks deal. Jared Kelenic, was when somebody floated in the Sox Machine comments is more talking about like, well, he just, hasn't clicked, and maybe this is the year for the Mariners to sell on him. Like, there are some conversations to be had here that and I think a wide array of players can be brought in now to where they're not counted on. Like, if Torres is just the mediocre Torres, the okay Torres, fine. If Kelenic doesn't quite click, fine. You can play for that upside a little bit because Benintendi, theoretically, and I say theoretically, and I knock on wood once again, provides a certainty.
As someone that has been driving the bus to trade Liam Hendricks for the Chicago White Sox, I am stopping the bus. I think if you're going to make this type of a commitment for Andrew Benintendi, I think the White Sox are leaning towards keeping Liam Hendricks for at least the first half of this season. Now, if things go to hell in the first half, much like it did in 2022, maybe the White Sox change their minds. If the offers get better, as teams get more desperate in trying to add a premium closer, again, I draw to everyone's attention to how the 2022 postseason went for a select number of teams. Seattle wishes that they had an elite closer in game 1 against Houston. The Blue Jays wish that they had an elite closer against Seattle in the first round. St. Louis as well against the Phillies. Maybe that series plays out differently if they actually hold on to game 1 and they had someone like Liam Hendricks. So I think there's always been plenty of interest, but if you're going to make this type of commitment now to Andrew Benintendi for 5 years, that I'm starting to feel like the White Sox hold on to Liam Hendricks. But as you mentioned, Jim, it still makes sense to trade him depending on the team that's calling, and you can wait out to get the best deal available. But when I had the idea back in October, when I did my offseason plan project, I felt like make a deal with the Dodgers. They have a lot of starting pitching depth. This is how you can address the starting pitching depth. They still have Michael Busch. We don't know what's going on with Dansby Swanson. Ken Rosenthal wrote today for The Athletic, the Dodgers are still trying to figure out if they have to pay Trevor Bauer or not. If they don't have to pay Trevor Bauer, then if Dansby Swanson is still available, then his market changes drastically. And maybe even the Dodgers pick up the phone again and call Rick Hahn and be like, hey, we got money. We'll be more than happy to take Liam Hendricks off your hands. Here's Michael Busch, our top 100 prospect that plays second base. Let's make a deal. He bats left-handed. That's what you guys need, right? Let's make a deal. So I'm curious on how it's going to play out in the next couple of months. But right now, for someone since Halloween, I've been advocating for the White Sox to trade Liam Hendricks, save on that money, spend that money to address other areas on the roster. Now that you've spent that money in Benintendi, if you can hold on to Hendricks without any issues, Beef, I would feel like the White Sox would hold on to him. But now, in the most White Sox way possible, watch, they have to trade Liam Hendricks to pay Andrew Benintendi. They made that investment already. They didn't have the money to do it, but they promised Jerry they would have the money after they traded Liam Hendricks, and now they have to trade Hendricks. Now, watch me being raw, and that's actually how it ends up playing out.
Well, you would get an improvement at another spot, so at least it wouldn't be all for naught. But yeah, I agree with you. We were talking before we went on the air, and I had updated my spreadsheet with like kind of the projected payroll, and that payroll is bumping up towards 190 million right now. When you kind of fill in all the spots that we don't have anyone in currently, with just league minimum salaries, I'm at 188.6. The White Sox salary, the payroll is getting very close to 2022 range.
Yes. And when I'll bring this graphic up again. So these are the best remaining position player free agents. And if you watched one of our videos recently that we put up this morning, actually, before Andrew Benintendi signed, we had a segment on our YouTube channel talking about the best remaining position player free agents. And again, these are Steamer WAR projections. There's no JD Martinez because right now Steamer doesn't think JD Martinez is going to be better than a one WAR player, which at age 36 is pretty shocking, but JD Martinez is not exactly aging well. Dansby Swanson is still number 1 on the list, and Gene Segura is still number 2 on the list. Elvis Andrus now bumps up to number 3 on the list, and I feel like he's going to find a home quickly after the Dansby Swanson sweepstakes finally wraps up. There's a lot of interest in Miami in regards to Justin Turner. So maybe Turner goes from the West Coast in Los Angeles out to the East Coast in Miami, something to monitor. And again, back to the conversation regarding Michael Conforto, he's the 5th best remaining position player according to Steamer projections. And Chirizi's guy, Jurickson Profar. If the White Sox line Profar, I'd be happy for Chirizi because he got more than one correct. Right now, I'm feeling a bit sad for him in the free agent pickup contest. Like, let's bring this up again. That's a lot of red X's for Chirizi. Yeah. Like, you got 2 right, Beef. You know, great call on the Carlos Rodon going to the Yankees.
Thank you.
The Braves for Dansby Swanson, that's really solid too.
It's live right now.
I'm not feeling good about the Orioles getting Dansby Swanson. I don't feel good about the Orioles spending any type of money this offseason, which is a surprise. David Peralta still may be an option for the White Sox, a bench bat possibility. But yeah, that's a lot of red X's for Chirizi. A lot of red X's for him.
Stopped on a whammy a lot in this competition.
He went bold and he got burned. Oh, man. But it'll be interesting to see what the White Sox do. They have addressed the outfield. So the White Sox have at least 2 outfielders right now. Luis Robert manning center field and Andrew Benintendi out in left field. But that will do it for this emergency podcast, this Emergency Sox Machine Live, as we talk about the Andrew Benintendi signing. And Beef, thank you so much for joining us. And you can follow Beefloaf on Twitter. He's at Mr. Delicious13. Such a ridiculous Twitter handle.
That's right.
Obviously, watch our friends from the 108 on YouTube and listen to their podcast as well. Go to youtube.com/FromThe108 to watch their excellent content. Their most recent episode is one of our season ticket buddies, Wally Money, a very entertaining gentleman. I can't wait to see when the switch flips from Walt to Walter during the episode. But definitely check out their most recent episode that they just published on YouTube. Beef, thank you so much for joining us.
Boys, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
And Jim, we'll catch up after the weekend to see what else happens in free agency. Maybe a trade. Maybe we get an explanation from Rick Hahn. I doubt it. But we'll see what the next dominoes fall in the offseason.
Yeah, it was nice to have an emergency podcast for like the first time in forever. So great.
I know.
More of these.
I was getting worried. It'd be like February. Like, they still haven't done anything. But they finally
Lorenzo
did.
Kane, emergency podcast.
Yes.
But again, that will do it for this episode of Sox Machine Live. Thank you guys so much for watching the live stream. If you didn't get an opportunity to watch the live stream, no worries. We always take the audio version of the recording and upload it to the podcast feed, which you can subscribe to the Sox Machine podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. If you just stumbled across our YouTube page but haven't subscribed to our channel, help us out and subscribe at youtube.com/Sox Machine, as we are inching closer to 1,000 subscribers. So that's our next milestone. And as long as Twitter still exists, You can follow us at Twitter. We are at Sox Machine. You can follow me on Twitter at SoxMachine_Josh. If you enjoy our work and would like to help support us, you can do so at patreon.com/SoxMachine, where our Patreon supporters, they get more, they get exclusive content, they get ad-free versions of both the podcast and the website. And when we have new Sox Machine swag in the new Sox Machine store, they're the first ones to receive it. Monthly plans start at $2, or you could save with an annual subscription. Again, you can sign up at patreon.com/SoxMachine. Sox Machine Live is a production of SoxMachine.com, your home for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Beefloaf and Jim Margalus, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for watching and listening.